Hi YouTube, and this is JTrain997 back with another G.I. Joe The Rise of Cobra review, and this time it's going to be my Storm Shadow from the Artic Threat. Now, this is the last of the Rise of Cobra line. After this, they'll be switching to Pursuit of Cobra, and they're of course going to be switching to the environment figures. So, this Storm Shadow comes with his oversized rocket launcher, which looks like a repackage of the first one we got with Snake Eyes, both his katanas, his sword sheaths, a sai, and a wolf claw, and his base. Very similar accessories to the first Storm Shadow we received. Not much at all new here. Now, the big difference between him and other Storm Shadows is that he's now wearing a coat, and he kind of has some black checks to make it, I don't know, fit into more camouflage. I would assume that just solid white would be better in an Arctic landscape, but oh well. Of course, the new box design. Storm Shadow's file card says, Storm Shadow is a ninja mercenary who works for Cobra and was trained by the mystical Arashikage clan. He uses a high-velocity aerial line to battle the G.I. Joe team's Ninja Commando and his sworn enemy Snake Eyes. Preferred weapon, hand-forged steel heirloom katana sword. And down here you just have Hawk giving a little spiel about all the different environments. So, Artic Threat Storm Shadow is one of the more sought-after ones in Wave 5. Let's pull this bad boy out of the packaging. And here we have Artic Threat Storm Shadow out of his packaging. Now, before we get a 360, you're going to notice this wolf claw is very half on here. It will not fit over his wrist or in his hand. It won't fit on this hand. I can't even force this thing over. When you do force it, all the claws just kind of bend together. Very disappointing. This is the same wolf claw we got with the first Storm Shadow, but we got a updated one with Kamakura that was much, much better. That basically had a place for him to hold it plus the wrist brace. So it's very disappointing to see this. Even more disappointing that the thing doesn't work. So throwing that off to the side. Of course, Artic Threat Storm Shadow. I have him holding his sai in his other hand. Quick 360. Have both his sword sheaths on with his swords in them. Very solid connection to the base on this, which is always a plus. His hands were closed very tightly. Having it hard, yeah. So it's a little hard to get his accessories in and out, but it's not impossible. Of course, his sword sheath comes right off his back. Both his swords come out. Same kind of same swords we've been getting with each Storm Shadow. Like I said, very, very tightly closed hands for some reason on this figure. Almost as bad as the first one where I had to cut the fingers open. Of course, these are not permanently closed though. These are just irritating. Let's pry that one in. Course. There we have him holding both his swords. Now let's pull these out of his hands and go on to his articulation. Getting his base out of the way. Boom. Artic Storm Shadow's arms actually move fairly well. It really surprised me. I thought the coat would hinder it, but no real issues with that. The coat, of course, seems like it can be pulled off if you want to put enough force in there. But then he just looks pretty much like the same Storm Shadow. Legs are of course hindered by the coat at a point. Go out fine, bend at the knee. No real ankle movement because of the way the leg comes down. There's some very slight ankle movement in there. Head moves side to side, barely. So, Artic Threat Storm Shadow. Very close to Arctic Strike. I keep wanting to say Arctic Strike, but I get by. Disappointing that his hands are closed so tightly, which makes the wolf claw pretty much unusable. Oops. Did not mean to knock that off. Oh, I got his swords in his wrong sheath. Disappointing that his hands are closed so tightly, but with time those will get better. So let's get a quick comparison to the other Storm Shadows available. So here we have all versions of Storm Shadow currently available from the Rise of Cobra line. Just the standard, the Paris Pursuit, the Artic Threat, and now the Arctic Strike. Oops. Did not mean for that to happen. Okay, so popping all these back up. Storm Shadows have actually been solid figures so far. There's really none of these that I have a complaint with. He was a great figure. He was great, movie accurate. He was just awesome looking. And of course, now we get to him. He's actually probably the lightest, the worst kind of white out of him. His white actually has kind of a yellow tint to it under a certain light. Oh well, still white though. Just being a little nitpicky there. Honestly, this is probably, not to say it's a bad figure, but this is one of the worst Storm Shadows we've gotten so far. I have to say, if you've got to go with one, none of these are really bad, but they're all kind of superior to this guy. He's still my favorite. Oh, by the way, I have him holding 2 side now. That's just an extra one. I wanted him posed with both. Overall, he's a great looking figure. He is a bit similar to the other Storm Shadows. Coat is removable, which probably wouldn't hinder his legs as much. Wolf Claw is pretty much useless. Overall, though, he's still a solid figure. He looks great on his base. I'd go a solid 7.5, almost an 8, losing a little bit of points for just being irritating as far as hands and being really similar to a few other figures. Also, before I forget, I was right, same launchers that came with Storm Shadow with a little rappel hook and boom. So, this is JTrain997. Artic Threat Storm Shadow gets a 7.5 out of 10. And I'll see you soon, YouTube.